President Trump's proposed budget will likely be a hot topic when Congress gets back to work this week. Washington Examiner chief congressional correspondent Susan Ferricchio is here to discuss what's next. Susan, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Great to be here.
Okay, the vacation is over. Congress is getting back to work. And I'm curious, when you look at administrations past, have you ever seen an instance where a president's blueprint has been a blueprint for congressional leaders when they go to draft their own budget?
Well, the party hates to denounce its own president's budget, and so you hear them carefully wording their view of the Trump budget on the Republican side, and you hear Democrats denouncing it. It's all to be expected. But as you say, historically, Congress never takes up the president's budget. President Obama's budget in 2016, for example, was defeated in the Senate by a vote of 99-1. And it was taken up a few other times, too, and failed with margins in a very similar way. So presidents' budgets are never popular. They're looked at as, as one Republican described to me as press releases. But there are things in them that Republicans definitely like. For example, Trump's budget balances in 10 years. This is a long-standing goal of the Republican Party to balance the federal government. It curbs domestic spending, another goal of the Republicans. And it institutes pro-growth tax cuts. So you heard Republicans talk about, look, these are great goals. The problem is when you put a budget forward that actually does cut the budget, which Democrats talk about a lot, it's harder to actually get done because that involves scaling back programs that are popular in many states, such as low-income heating assistance, the National Institutes of Health, Meals on Wheels. We heard a lot of talk about that when the budget came out.
PBS, Big Bird,
exactly. All these things it gets really hard when they get in committee and it's time to actually make these cuts. That's why these cuts never happen, and the president's budget will probably not really be incorporated much in what Congress finally does when it puts out their spending measures later this year.
That sort of brings me to my next question, because if we remember in the beginning of May, OMB Director Mick Mulvaney came out. It was a full court press. He was talking to a lot of folks in the press pool saying, listen, we need those 60 votes in the Senate. We need this to be a bipartisan bill. But what part of the skinny budget is going to pass?
Well, when you look at parts of the budget that incorporate the tax cuts, Congress is separately working on tax cuts that would be part of their 2018 budget proposal. So that's realistic. There will probably be some kind of attempt to pass tax cuts in the budget. There's that. Republicans have also talked a lot about reforming welfare and other social services. You heard Paul Ryan, the House Speaker, make this part of his budget. He talks about it all the time. President Trump has incorporated work requirements for food stamps. I wouldn't rule out seeing that in a budget. What you probably won't see, though, Elizabeth, is these big cuts to, some of the safety net stuff like LIHEAP, which is the low-income heating assistance. That's not going to fly. Also, President Trump's budget makes really big cuts to Medicaid, $600 billion, which now, on the Republican side, they want to make entitlement reform too, but they're more interested in Social Security and Medicare, and that's a whole nother issue. So they're on opposite sides on that. Trump has said he would never touch those things, and he doesn't in this budget.
Right.
Yet they share the goal of wanting to reform entitlements. It's just how they do it, the details.
I want to do a quick overview with you because, we talk about the process in the regular order. Obviously, the fiscal year ends at the end of September. It has to go to committees. It has to pass a resolution before it even goes to appropriators. At the same time, if you look at the headlines over the weekend, all we're talking about is the fact that people in Congress are looking forward to testimony of former FBI Director James Comey. No one's talking about the budget. And September, it's not really that far away.
Yeah, it's true. And they'll tell you that, look, this is distracting lawmakers on Capitol Hill, but it's not stopping us from what we're doing on getting a budget together, spending bills. For example, the House Appropriations subcommittees are meeting, working on individual spending bills that will need to be out the door before the fiscal year ends, as you say, on September 30th. They're working on health care reform in working groups that are closed to the public, but they're happening every day of the week over in the Senate. Tax reform is happening in both chambers. Again, this stuff a lot of it's not out in the public, yes, but they're doing it. So they're not sitting around doing nothing but talking about Comey and Russia and this and that. A lot of it is the media asking them about it in the hallways, and that is distracting.
Now, what takes precedent? Because we can talk about tax reform, we can talk about health care. Those things can feasibly be pushed, but the budget has to be passed, or else then we talk about a shutdown.
Well, the budget is a spending blueprint. What they really need to pass without a shutdown is spending bills.
Okay.
Those are 12 separate appropriations measures that are now churning through Congress. They're way behind on this. It's likely we'll end up with another big so-called omnibus spending bill. The problem with not passing a budget is you're not setting a spending level, and it's harder to do. However, it's not impossible, and it has happened with greater frequency because of the partisan divide in Congress and the difficulty in getting together on these spending issues. It's all very complicated, but ultimately what it will involve is them getting these spending bills together, which are separate from the budget, by the end of the year.
Okay. That's when we bring you on, Susan. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
We appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks.